The encounter. It was an ordinary day on the space station Nova Aternis, a bustling hub of interspecies cooperation located on the fringes of explored space. Humans, along with a plethora of alien species, coexisted, worked, and occasionally indulged in cultural exchanges that ranged from the mundane to the bizarre. Lieutenant Alex Carter, a seasoned human officer, was stationed here as part of the Earth Defense Forces. His daily routine involved overseeing security protocols, maintaining relations with other species, and enjoying the unique blend of cultures. The station itself was a marvel of engineering. A massive, spinning cylinder with artificial gravity on the inner walls, its internal environment was carefully controlled to support the various needs of its inhabitants. The streets of Nova Aternis were lined with alien shops, food stalls, and entertainment venues, making it a vibrant and chaotic place, yet somehow balanced. Alex was finishing his rounds when a new arrival caught his eye. She was a member of the Villaran species, a race known for their elegance, intelligence, and ethereal beauty. Her skin was a soft, iridescent blue, shimmering as if lit from within. Her eyes, large and luminescent, were a deep violet, filled with curiosity and warmth. She wore a flowing garment that hugged her life form, accentuating her graceful movements. Lieutenant Carter. She spoke in perfect English, her voice melodious and calm. Alex was momentarily stunned by her presence. He had seen many Villarans before, but something about this one was different. There was an air of confidence about her, a magnetic aura that drew him in. "Yes, that's me," he replied, managing to keep his voice steady. "How can I assist you?" "My name is Lyra," she said with a slight bow, a gesture of respect among her people. "I have recently arrived on Nova Aternis as part of an exchange program between our species. I seek to learn more about humans, their customs, and their ways." Alex nodded, intrigued. It wasn't unusual for different species to show interest in human culture, but Lyra's tone suggested something deeper. "I'd be happy to help. What specifically are you interested in?" Lyra hesitated, her eyes searching his. "I have heard many things about your species, particularly about how you reproduce. It is fascinating to me. In Villaran culture, reproduction is a highly sacred and clinical process, but I hear humans approach it with a unique blend of emotion and physicality." Alex blinked, taken aback. This wasn't a topic he expected to be discussing with an alien, let alone one as captivating as Lyra. Well, yes. Human reproduction is quite personal and intimate." "Personal and intimate," Lyra echoed, as if tasting the words. "In our culture, reproduction is purely for the continuation of our species, devoid of personal attachment. But I find the human approach intriguing. Can you tell me more?" Alex felt a flush rising in his cheeks. He wasn't sure how to navigate this conversation, but Lyra's sincere curiosity made him reluctant to brush her off. "It's not something we usually discuss openly, but I'll try to explain. For humans, reproduction isn't just about the act itself. It's about the bond between individuals. It's an expression of love, trust, and connection." Lyra leaned in, her eyes widening. "Love? Trust? These concepts are not associated with reproduction among my people. It is merely a transaction, a duty." "That's very different from how we see it," Alex said, relaxing a little. "For humans, it's about creating something together, a life that represents both individuals. It's emotional, sometimes even spiritual." Lyra looked thoughtful, her gaze distant for a moment. "And this bond you speak of, it is forged through physical means?" "Yes," Alex replied, feeling his pulse quicken. "Physical closeness is a big part of it. But it's more than that. It's about sharing something profound with someone you care about deeply." Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment, Alex felt a strange connection between them. "I see," she said softly. "It is as much about the mind and spirit as it is about the body." "Exactly," Alex said, relieved that he was able to convey something so complex. It's a very human thing, I suppose. Lyra smiled, a gentle curve of her lips that made Alex's heart skip a beat. Thank you for explaining it to me, Lieutenant Carter. I find your species more fascinating with each passing moment. Any time, Alex said, trying to keep his tone professional. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask. I might take you up on that, Lyra replied with a playful glint in her eyes. For now, I will explore more of this station. Perhaps our paths will cross again soon. As she turned to leave, Alex couldn't help but watch her go, his mind racing with the implications of their conversation. What had started as a routine day had taken a turn into the unexpected, and something told him that this was just the beginning. The inquiry. The alien who had captured Alex's attention was unlike any he had seen before. Her species was known as the Zelfar, a race known for their ethereal beauty and advanced cognitive abilities. Standing at nearly 7 feet tall, her skin shimmered with a faint iridescence, shifting colors with her emotions. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, glowed with a soft blue light, and her hair cascaded down her back like liquid silver. She moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, her every step a dance that captivated those who watched. As she approached, Alex noticed that her movements were deliberate, as though she were assessing everything around her with a keen intelligence. When their eyes met, she offered a small, polite smile, revealing perfectly symmetrical features that seemed to be carved from marble. She was stunning, and Alex felt a strange mix of awe and unease in her presence. Lieutenant Carter, I presume. Her voice was melodious, with a slight musical lilt that made it sound like she was singing every word. Alex nodded, his professional demeanor kicking in. Yes, that's me. How can I assist you? I am Laura, she introduced herself, inclining her head slightly. I have recently arrived on Nova Ternis as part of a cultural exchange program between the Zelfar and the Earth Defense Forces. I am particularly interested in understanding more about human biology and reproductive practices. The directness of her inquiry caught Alex off guard. He had encountered many species with a keen interest in human biology before, but few had approached the subject with such blunt curiosity. He blinked, trying to maintain his composure. I see. Well, we do have educational resources available, and I can certainly arrange for you to meet with a medical officer who can explain. Liara interrupted him with a wave of her hand, her expression remaining serene. I appreciate the offer, Lieutenant, but I am more interested in a practical demonstration. You see, the concept of sexual reproduction is quite foreign to the Zelfar. We reproduce through a form of asexual replication that is driven by cognitive synchronization. The idea of two beings coming together to create new life through physical means is both fascinating and perplexing to me. Alex's mind raced as he tried to process what she was saying. Was she seriously asking what he thought she was asking? He cleared his throat, struggling to find the right words. I'm not sure that would be appropriate. Liara tilted her head slightly, as if studying his reaction. Is it not common among humans to engage in such activities? I have read that your species places a great deal of significance on reproduction and the physical bonds formed between partners. Yes, that's true, but it's also something that's deeply personal, Alex explained, feeling increasingly flustered. It's not something we typically discuss with strangers, let alone demonstrate. I see, Liara replied thoughtfully, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly as she considered his words. I did not mean to cause discomfort. Among the Zelfar, knowledge is freely shared, and we often seek direct experiences to understand other species better. I suppose I must adjust to the cultural differences. Alex nodded, relieved that the conversation seemed to be shifting away from the uncomfortable topic. It's just a matter of perspective, I guess. Humans tend to have a different approach when it comes to these things. Liara smiled again, a gesture that was both warm and slightly enigmatic. I am eager to learn more about your kind, Lieutenant Carter. Perhaps there are other aspects of human culture you could introduce me to. Something less intimate, but equally enlightening. Alex was quick to latch onto the new direction of the conversation. Of course, there are plenty of other cultural experiences we could share. I could show you some of the human food options here on the station, or we could visit the Holo Theater. It's a great way to understand our history and values. That sounds delightful, Liara agreed. I am curious to experience human cuisine. I have read that it is quite varied and often reflects the diversity of your planet. As they walked through the bustling corridors of Nova Aternis, Alex couldn't help but glance at Liara occasionally, wondering what other surprises she had in store. He had dealt with many alien species before, but none quite like her. There was something about the way she carried herself, the way she seemed to absorb every detail of her surroundings, that made him both curious and cautious. They arrived at a food court that offered a wide variety of dishes from different cultures, both human and alien. The aromas of cooking food filled the air, and the sound of conversation and laughter echoed around them. Alex guided Liara to a stall that specialized in Earth cuisine. Let's start with something simple, Alex suggested, ordering a classic dish of spaghetti and meatballs. As they waited for their food, he explained the history behind the dish, how it was a staple in many human households, and how it reflected the fusion of different culinary traditions from Earth. When the dish arrived, Liara examined it closely, her eyes glowing a brighter shade of blue. She took a cautious bite, her expression inscrutable at first, but then she nodded appreciatively. This is quite satisfying. The flavors are complex, yet harmonious. I can see why humans take such pleasure in their food. Alex smiled, pleased that she was enjoying the experience. Food is a big part of our culture. It brings people together, whether it's for a family meal or a celebration. Liara nodded thoughtfully, continuing to eat with a deliberate pace. It is fascinating how different our species are, yet how much we share in common. The desire for connection, the need for sustenance, the pursuit of understanding. Perhaps, Lieutenant, we are not as different as we might seem. Alex couldn't help but agree. Despite the initial awkwardness of their encounter, he was beginning to see Liara in a new light. There was a sincerity to her curiosity, a genuine desire to bridge the gap between their species. And in that moment, as they shared a simple meal, Alex realized that this cultural exchange might be far more enriching than he had anticipated. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the memory of her earlier question. The Zeltha might be curious about human reproduction, but for Alex, it was a reminder of just how much they still had to learn about each other. As they finished their meal and prepared to leave the food court, Liara turned to Alex with a soft smile. Thank you for sharing this experience with me, Lieutenant. I look forward to our future interactions. There is much I still wish to learn about humans, and about you. Alex returned a smile, though his thoughts were still swirling with questions. The pleasure was mine, Liara. Let's take it one step at a time, and we'll see where this journey takes us. Little did they know, their journey was just beginning, and it would take them far beyond the confines of Nova Aternis and into the uncharted territory of interspecies relationships, where curiosity and cultural differences would collide in unexpected ways. The experiment. In the days following their first encounter, Liara and Alex spent more time together, exploring different aspects of human culture. Their conversations were filled with a blend of curiosity and humor, with Liara often surprising Alex with her sharp insights and probing questions. Despite the initial awkwardness, a genuine friendship began to form between them, one based on mutual respect and a shared desire to learn from one another. But as much as Alex enjoyed their interactions, he couldn't ignore the subtle tension that lingered in the air whenever the topic of reproduction came up. Liara was fascinated by the concept in a way that bordered on obsession, though she was always careful to approach the subject with tact. Still, Alex could sense that her curiosity was not fully satisfied by the academic explanations and theoretical discussions they had engaged in so far. One evening, After a particularly engaging conversation about human art and literature, Liara broached the topic again, this time with a more serious tone. "Lieutenant Carter," she began, using his formal title, as she often did when she wanted to emphasize the importance of her words. "I have been reflecting on our discussions, and I believe I am ready to conduct a more direct study of human reproductive practices." Alex nearly choked on the drink he had been sipping. He set the glass down and looked at her, his expression a mix of surprise and caution. "Liara, we've talked about this. It's not something that can be studied like a scientific experiment." "I understand that," Liara replied, her voice calm and measured. "But I have also come to understand that your species values personal connection and trust. I would not propose such an experiment lightly. I have grown to respect you, Lieutenant, and I believe that if we were to engage in this study together, it would be conducted with the utmost care and consideration." Alex leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair as he tried to process her words. "Liara, this isn't just about respect. Human relationships are complicated. They involve emotions, intimacy, and sometimes vulnerability. It's not something you can just decide to do for the sake of curiosity." Liara nodded, her expression serious. "I have studied human relationships extensively, and I am aware of the emotional complexities involved. That is why I have chosen to approach you with this request. You have shown yourself to be open-minded and compassionate, qualities that I believe are essential for this kind of interaction." Alex felt a pang of anxiety in his chest. He had never anticipated that his role in this cultural exchange would lead to such a personal and delicate situation. He genuinely liked Liara, but the idea of engaging in a study of human reproduction with her was something he had never considered. It felt wrong somehow, even if her intentions were purely scientific. "I appreciate the trust you're showing in me," Alex said carefully, "but I think you might be underestimating how deeply personal this is for humans. It's not just a physical act. It's about connection, love, sometimes even a lifelong commitment. I don't think it would be fair to either of us to approach it as an experiment." Liara's eyes softened, the glow within them dimming slightly as she considered his words. "You are right, of course. I had not fully accounted for the emotional implications. Among the Zelfar, physical interactions are devoid of such complexities, and I fear I may have overlooked the significance they hold for your species." Alex felt a sense of relief wash over him as Liara seemed to reconsider her proposal. "It's okay, Liara. I know you're trying to understand, and that's what this cultural exchange is all about. But maybe we should focus on other aspects of human life that are less intimate." Liara nodded, though there was a hint of disappointment in her expression. "You have been very patient with me, Lieutenant. I will respect your boundaries and shift my focus to other areas of study. However, I cannot deny that my curiosity remains. I will have to find another way to satisfy it, perhaps through observation or less direct means." Alex wasn't sure what she meant by less direct means, but he decided not to press the issue. There's plenty to explore without crossing any lines. "How about we take a look at some Earth history next? I can show you some holo recordings of significant events. Maybe that will give you more insight into how humans think and feel." Liara's expression brightened at the suggestion. "That sounds like an excellent idea. I am eager to learn more about the history that has shaped your species." With that, they left the lounge area and headed toward the station's Holo Theater, where Alex queued up a selection of historical documentaries. As the images of Earth's past began to play on the large screen, Liara watched with rapt attention, absorbing every detail. But as they watched the events unfold, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation they had just had was far from over. Liara's curiosity about human reproduction was still very much alive, and he had a nagging suspicion that she would find a way to pursue it, even if it meant going around him. Several days passed, and Alex and Liara continued their cultural exchanges, delving into topics like politics, philosophy, and technology. Each conversation was stimulating and enlightening, and Alex found himself increasingly impressed by Liara's intellect and perspective. She had a way of challenging his assumptions and making him see the world through new eyes. Then, one evening, as they were walking back to their quarters after a particularly engaging discussion about human ethics, Liara stopped suddenly, her eyes narrowing as if she were deep in thought. "Lieutenant Carter," she said, her voice tinged with determination, "I have decided that I must experience human reproduction for myself." Alex froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "Liara, we talked about this. It's not something you can just decide to do." "I know," Liara replied, her tone gentle but firm. "But I have given it a great deal of thought, and I have come to the conclusion that this experience is essential for my understanding of your species. I promise you, I will approach it with the utmost respect and care. But I cannot ignore the importance of this knowledge." Alex felt a surge of conflicting emotions: anger, confusion, and even a strange sense of guilt. He didn't want to deny Liara the opportunity to learn, but he also couldn't reconcile the idea of participating in something that felt so wrong on a personal level. "Liara, I can't." "Please," she interrupted, her eyes pleading. "I know this is difficult for you, and I do not want to pressure you. But I must ask, if not you, then who? I trust you, Lieutenant Carter. I believe that with you, this experience would be conducted with integrity and understanding. If I were to pursue this with another, I fear it might not be handled with the same care." Alex's mind raced as he searched for a way to respond. He knew he had to make a decision, and quickly. The situation had spiraled into something he had never anticipated, and he could feel the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. "Liara," he said slowly, "I need time to think about this. I can't give you an answer right now." Liara nodded, her expression filled with empathy. "I understand. Take all the time you need, Lieutenant. I will await your decision." With that, they parted ways, each heading to their respective quarters. Alex couldn't shake the sense of unease that clung to him as he walked through the station's corridors. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, and one wrong move could send him, and Liara, tumbling into unknown territory. As he lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, Alex's thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. He had always considered himself open-minded, willing to embrace the unknown and explore new frontiers. But this was different. This wasn't just about understanding another culture. It was about crossing a line that he wasn't sure he was ready to cross. And yet, a part of him couldn't help but wonder. What if Liara was right? What if this experience was essential for her understanding of humanity? What if, by denying her this opportunity, he was hindering her growth and the potential for greater interspecies cooperation? The questions gnawed at him, and he knew that, one way or another, he would have to find an answer. The resolution. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Alex. His mind was in constant turmoil, torn between his duty to respect Liara's wishes and his personal convictions. He immersed himself in work, trying to distract himself from the looming decision that awaited him, but no amount of routine or busy-work could push away the inevitable. He knew that he had to face Liara and give her an answer. During their next meeting, Alex was noticeably distant, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a palpable tension. They had met in one of the quieter sections of the station, where the hum of machinery was the only sound accompanying their conversation. Liara, sensing the shift in his mood, decided not to bring up the topic immediately. Instead, they discussed more neutral subjects: recent developments in the cultural exchange program, the station's latest security upgrades, and the progress of their shared research on interspecies diplomacy. But the unspoken question hung heavily between them, and it wasn't long before Liara decided to address it directly. "Lieutenant Carter," she began, her voice soft and cautious, "I can see that you've been troubled. I do not wish to cause you any distress, but I must ask if you've come to a decision regarding my request." Alex looked at her, taking in the sincerity of her expression, the way her eyes seemed to search his for understanding. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking. Liara, he started, his voice steady despite the conflict raging inside him. I've thought about this a lot. I've weighed every aspect, from our cultural differences to the potential implications for both of us. And I've come to the conclusion that I can't go through with it. Liara's eyes flickered, the faint glow within them dimming as she absorbed his words. I see, she said quietly, though there was no trace of anger or disappointment in her tone. Only a deep, contemplative sadness. May I ask why? It's not because I don't respect you or the importance of what you're trying to learn, Alex explained. It's because I do. This isn't just a cultural exchange or a scientific experiment for me. Human reproduction, and the relationships that go along with it, are deeply personal, emotional experiences. It's not something I can engage in without that connection. And I don't think it would be fair to either of us if I tried to force it. Liara nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. I understand, Lieutenant. I hadn't fully grasped the depth of emotion involved for your species. My perspective, shaped by Zelfa customs and values, led me to approach this in a way that may have been too clinical, too detached. I see now that this is not something to be taken lightly. Alex felt a wave of relief wash over him at her understanding. I'm glad you see it that way. I don't want this to come between us or affect the friendship we've built. There's still so much we can learn from each other, just maybe not in this way. Liara's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. Our friendship means a great deal to me, Alex. More than I can express, and while I may not fully experience the human concept of love, I believe that I have come to understand the importance of emotional bonds in your culture. I will continue my studies, but with a greater sensitivity to these differences. For a moment, they sat in silence, both reflecting on the journey they had taken together. It had been a challenging, sometimes uncomfortable path, but it had led to a deeper understanding of each other's cultures, values, and limits. As the station's artificial sun set, casting a warm golden glow through the windows, Alex turned to Liara with a renewed sense of purpose. There's a lot we can still do together, Liara. We can continue to explore human culture, maybe even work on some joint projects. But most importantly, we can continue being friends, and that's something I'm really looking forward to. Liara's smile widened, and for the first time, Alex saw a hint of what might be the Zelfar equivalent of joy in her expression. I would like that very much, Alex. Our friendship is indeed a valuable bond, and I believe that it will lead to many more discoveries about each other and about our respective species. They stood up, and Alex extended his hand in a gesture of camaraderie. Liara hesitated for a moment, then took his hand in hers, their skin brushing against each other in a moment of mutual respect and understanding. As they parted ways, Alex felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He knew that the path ahead would still be filled with challenges, but he was confident that he and Liara could navigate them together. Their friendship had been tested in ways he never could have anticipated, but it had emerged stronger for it. Over the following weeks, their interactions became even more enriching, as they focused on the aspects of each other's cultures that fascinated them most. Liara, ever curious, began to delve into human philosophy and ethics, intrigued by the way humans grappled with moral dilemmas and the complexities of their own existence. Alex, in turn, found himself learning more about self-art and communication, gaining insights into a species that was so different, yet in many ways so similar to his own. Through their shared journey, they both came to realize that the most important discoveries weren't always the ones that could be measured or quantified. Sometimes, the greatest understanding came from the connections forged between individuals, from the simple, profound bond of friendship that could transcend even the most profound cultural differences. And as they continued their work on Nova Aternis, Alex knew that, whatever the future held, he and Liara would face it together, as allies, as partners, and most importantly, as friends.